What's going on, guys? Adam here with 80 Proof Goods. I've gotten questions a ton on my YouTube Shorts and on my TikTok, and there was one that stood out to me as something that's kind of repetitive over time, and I've never really addressed it, and I think it's really about time I make a video about my tools. So what you have here in front of me is my daily tools that I use every single day. Now, there's obviously more tools in my drawers here and in my desk and everything like that, but this is on top of my desktop. Every single day. I use almost all of these for most projects. So I want to show you guys what I have in store here and what I use and what I like to use, and I'll explain why. So first things first, I started this business about 2.5, almost 3 years ago. January 2020 is when I started fooling around with Leathercraft, and it got more serious in that spring. And I picked up this wood box here from Home Goods, I think, for like 15-20 bucks from Home Goods years ago, and I didn't ever really expect it to last forever, but don't fix what ain't broke, I guess. It's been really helpful for housing all of my hand tools, and this thing is on my desk 24/7, and it houses all of what I would consider to be the essentials. You can see it's got 3 different kind of pockets here. The first pocket here I use for everyday hand tools, what I would consider to be kind of the actual main essentials: edge beveler, French skiver, bone folder, pricking or scratch awl, screwdriver, things like that. Secondary is for everyday cutting tools. I have a rotary blade, I've got my thread snips, thread zapper, and finally I've got my edge finishers. I've got my Tokonole and canvas cloth. That's the gist of it. Now I'm going to take you through every one of the tools, starting with my favorite brand of tools that I've ever owned, which is Palo Santo Factory. So these kind of hand tools here they're not in a set, but they come from the same company that uses Palo Santo wood, I believe, for all of their handles, and this is, I believe, handmade. This is the Palo Santo scratch awl. If you're not familiar with a scratch awl, or you're just getting started in Leathercraft, this guy here is going to be perfect for scratching literally the leather. You're scratching the leather where you're going to, cut out your template. So if you have a template here, I can give you an example. This is a template that I made for one of my notebook covers. So if you lay this on your leather, you can use a scratch awl to scratch the leather around the pattern so that you know exactly where you're going to cut out. So when you take this away, this left marks on the leather, and you cut it out from there, whether it be with, kind of a pattern knife like this one, or a roller blade, a rotary blade like this one. But scratch awl, absolutely essential tool in your arsenal. Next up, that I use, again, for every single project, is an edge beveler. Now, there's different sized edge bevelers. This one here is a number 2 edge beveler, again, from Palo Santo Factory. You can see a pattern here. It's the same wood. I forget what they call this particular colorway and finish, but I have 3 of them that match, and then one that's kind of an off color. So this is the number 2 edge beveler, and this is going to basically take your hard edges and round them out. So when you cut leather, you're leaving a really perfect 90-degree angle on your edge, which can kind of be a little rough when you run your finger over it. So you want to, when you're finishing your project, whether it be at the very, very end when everything's stitched together, or if you were, working on card slots and pockets, you want to bevel the edges that'll be opened up, and you want to kind of round them out. So that's what this does. It rounds out those edges, preparing it for a finishing compound like Tokonole, which I'll get to later. Again, it comes in different sizes. I find the number 2 to be kind of the all-around edge beveler that you can use for most projects. The number that you go with, so number 2, number 0, number 4, whatever they are, determines how big the blade or the knife is at the top, which kind of it depends on how thick your project is or how thick your leather is. If you're working with specifically belts, if you're always working with 10 ounce, 12 ounce, 13 ounce leather, you probably want a bigger number, maybe a number 4, something like that. If you're exclusively working with really thin leather that's maybe 2 ounces or something, you might want to go with a number 0. I kind of go right in the middle. I ping pong from 3.5 to 5.5 ounces, and then I have 8 to 10 ounce leather for belts. I find number 2 works for pretty much everything. So if you're looking to pick up one edge beveler, the number 2 I would highly recommend, and then you can kind of play with it from there. I use this for everything. Number 2 works for pretty much everything, at least to get you started. Next up, really important, is a French skiver, in my opinion. Now, skiving could be a whole other video Skiving can, you know, there's 100 different methods that you can use. That's exaggerating, but I've tried, I'd say at least 3 or 4 different methods before I landed on French skiving. There's a number of different ways you can go about skiving, and if skiving is a new term to you, skiving is basically shaving down the back side of the leather, so essentially the flesh side. And if we're talking about the leather, this is just a scrap. This is the finished side, right? This is Walnut Minerva. That's beautiful finished side. The underside is called the flesh side, or the rough side. When you're skiving, you're basically scraping off layers of the flesh side to make the leather thinner. I personally love the French skiving method. Now, I don't have enough space in my workshop. I'm just in a single car garage right now for a bell skiver, which is a big machine that would skive for you perfectly every time, which takes just literally seconds to do. I don't have that, so I use the French skiving hand method, which can take some time and some muscle and kind of tires your arm out after a while, but this French skiver is killer. I love this thing. There's almost there's very little learning curve, I should say. With skiving methods, I find the learning curve to be really difficult to get over in some cases. This one I find to be super easy. This is a number 12, or a 12 millimeter French skiver. I have 2. So this one, and I have this one, an 8 millimeter and a 12 millimeter. If you're gonna pick up French skivers, I do kind of recommend picking up 2 in 2 different sizes. 12 millimeters, I think, is the thickest you can get. I've never seen anything thicker or bigger than 12 millimeters. So for skiving larger areas, 12 is going to be the way to go. If you're skiving thinner areas, maybe, or shorter areas, smaller areas, maybe like a T-slot card pocket or other card or cash pockets, an 8 millimeter is a good way to go. Just a smaller blade cuts just smaller area. It might take you a little bit more time, but in areas that are too small for a 12 millimeter, having a smaller one's definitely going to be the way to go. This is walnut. I think it's walnut. It's a bone folder. So once everything is together, a bone folder, you put in the card slots or your cash pockets, and you go around the edges and basically break any glue seal that might have been just like excess glue from the edges that kind of is keeping your card slot too tight together or too closed. So this is a really good way to kind of break those open. Definitely recommend a bone folder. I wouldn't call it completely required, but it's definitely a really good way to go to make sure your projects are finished properly. Finally, this is basic. This is just a flathead screwdriver. I use Chicago screws for things like tote bags, belts to keep the belt buckles on, and Chicago screws go on with a flathead screwdriver, so I just keep that handy. So that's essential pocket number 1. Pocket number 2. Mostly cutting. So this was kind of the bulk of it all. That's a lot of explaining to do. This pocket here is pocket number 2, mainly for all my blades. The blade number 1 that I use literally every single day, that you will never not see me use this on a project. This is a rotary blade. So this basically just cuts on your mat, cuts your projects. Really simple. I got this from Amazon. Again, this is my first thing I ever bought. Slide this down, the blade is exposed, slide it up, and it's protected so you don't get yourself cut. Highly recommend this. This is really great. Some people swear by it. I am one of those people. Other folks like to use an X-Acto blade to cut all their projects, but X-Acto blades, you're pulling the knife. In this, you push the knife, which is, in my opinion, way easier. You have a lot more control, I believe. Again, just my opinion. I think it's one of the most essential tools you could have in your arsenal. Next up, some scissors. These scissors are specifically for cutting thread. I find that if you use your scissors for other things, like you can use scissors to cut zippers, like a zipper chain. If you get like a big, 32 feet of zipper, you can cut it. If you cut things like that, other than thread, you're gonna dull out your scissor blades so that when you go to cut your thread, it might not cut, and that's really, really frustrating. So this is exclusively used for thread. This pair of crappy scissors I use for things like zippers. So I'll just cut, zipper chains in half. This, speaking of knives and skiving, is a Japanese skiving knife. So the idea here is, instead of pushing with your French skiver, which you would just literally put down and push, this you have to kind of carve. You're kind of carving the leather. A Japanese skiving knife like this is in my opinion painfully hard to get perfect. I commend people, because I'm sure there's crafters watching this laughing, that they use Japanese skivers just like this one, and they love it, and they swear by it, and it's the best skiving method. I believe you. If you can get this down, if you can get this technique down, more power to you. In my opinion, it's slower. It might look a lot better, look a lot cleaner, which the customer doesn't really see in the end result. But it's a clean, really clean skiving method that's really hard to get used to. That is beautiful. I would even consider it to be an art. If you can skive with a Japanese skiver, that's an art, man. That's difficult to do. But I bought one trying to get it down, and I got it for a while, and then my blade got dull, and the more I tried to sharpen it, I'm not really good at sharpening blades. I just didn't. It's one of those things that not only do you have to master the skiving technique, but you have to master sharpening the blade too, and if the blade's not sharp, it's not doing the job. So this became just kind of a crappy knife that I use to kind of just chop things. Say you know, if I have a pattern, I just want to lop something off, and I kind of use this to just chop. So that I just keep it handy. It's not a skiving method for me, but I just keep the knife handy to kind of lop things off. I guess what I didn't talk about was this guy. I keep pulling this out. This is a Palo Santo. I think it's called a pattern knife. It's like an X-Acto blade, but it's all one piece, one steel piece. They make covers that you can put on them. I don't have the cover, and I barely use it. I use it for like just a couple of small things that my rotary blade wouldn't get very well, but it's another really sharp, really useful blade to keep on hand. I would say this is the alternative to this, but I have both just because, you know, sometimes you want to get in a little corner that this rotary might not get too easily. Something to keep in mind. Simple. This is Thread Zapper. I used to swear by this before I realized how often I had to change the battery and how cheaply made it is. The idea is you hold this button and this little wire up at the top, these two pieces of metal connect and heat up really, really hot, 400 degrees or something, and you just tap your thread where you cut it off at the end. So once your stitching's done, you cut off the excess, and then you zap it, and it melts the thread, and it's a perfect finish. It is a perfect finish. I love it. It looks really great, except I've tried 1,000 of these and they all die within a month, and it's really frustrating. So this one still works. It's just, you know, you have to switch the battery every day almost. It's just a pain in the ass. I recommend it if you have patience. I don't have patience. This is a wing divider. This isn't really Leathercraft specific, but this is great for marking your stitching edges. So you have this little wind up thing, and it opens and closes the wing divider, and you can use a ruler to kind of set. I always set it at either 1/8 of an inch for my stitching lines or 1/4 of an inch for my stitching lines, depending on the project. But you'll set it at your width, and you'll put it on the edge, and you'll just wrap it around, and it'll mark your lines. Pocket number 3. This is for my burnishing, really. So I have 2 wood slickers. I have one that came in like an Amazon kit a couple years ago. I still have it. You can see it's looking a little worse for wear. And then this one's beautiful. This one's really nice. This one's from Little King Goods. My actual burnishing method, Tokonole and canvas cloth. So Tokonole comes in a big bottle, and I like to put it in this little applicator. It's a needle applicator. So you pull off this rubber thing, the Tokonole comes out, and I just dot it along my edges before I finish them, and then I take a piece of canvas cloth, just like this, and I fold it up, and I burnish. The reason I use this and not this is because this is not flexible. It doesn't kind of, contour to the shape of your edges. It just is what it is, and you have to kind of go back and forth of the different thicknesses and the different bevels inside of those little grooves. But this conforms to the edge of your leather, and you can hit every square inch of it. So if you just dab your Tokonole along the edges and then grab a piece of canvas cloth and burnish just like this, you're gonna hit all of that edge instead of having to do it multiple times with different pieces of wood. So this has its place. This definitely has its uses and has its place, and I like it for certain projects, but canvas cloth, man, is cheap. It lasts a really long time, and it's really reliable. I use it all the time. Canvas cloth is amazing. Highly recommend. I have other miscellaneous things like pliers. These pliers I really use. You can see they're kind of dented up. These pliers I use for if I set a rivet wrong, or if I don't like the way that the rivet is set, I'll just grab my pliers and kind of really pry off the rivet cap or something, you know. So I kind of use this to, or if I set a snap wrong and I don't really like the way it's set, I'll use this to kind of break that off so I can try again. I have a pen here, so if I'm marking a line that I know I want to skive from or start my skive, I have a gel pen to make sure I have that visible. This is an actual X-Acto knife with a really crappy blade. That's just kind of in there. And this is a rougher, an edge rougher. This is great for if you're gluing two pieces of finished leather together. So if these are two scraps, you can see we have the finished side, the rough side. If you're gluing the rough sides together, that's no problem. You don't have to do anything. They just glue together. They'll have a really good bond. But if you're gluing two sides that are the finished sides, they have a kind of a coating on them that might keep the glue from really sticking, in which case you'll want to take a rougher like this, and you'll kind of rough the leather, and it's literally it damages it. It's damaging the leather. It'll damage it and scratch it up and rough it up so that you get a little bit of a finer grip, or coarser grip, I should say, so that when you glue the pieces together, the glue has something to grip onto. So that's what that's used for. That's my essential box, my toolbox. This little thing on the side here is extremely important. I keep a lot of my essential punches there. I've got a 1/8 punch. This I use for making holes for snaps. I use it for belt holes as well. The bigger 3/16 punch I definitely use for bigger things like my Chicago screws. Pretty much exclusively use this guy for that. This is a rivet setter. Always use a rivet setter. And a belt hole or a belt tongue for the belt buckle. That punch here, it's a 1-inch tongue punch. And then finally, this little guy, I have two of them actually because this one's kind of broken, but this is for helping me set a hardware on Apple Watch bands. So I've got this is kind of the hardware setter, this little glass jar. Couldn't tell you where the glass jar came from. I think I just found it one day on a shelf in our storage, and I was like, it kind of looks useful, so I keep that there. On the opposite side is my glue. Now this kind of glue pot thing is relatively new to me within the past like 3 months, I would say, and I do not regret buying this at all. This thing is killer. I put my Aquillim 315 water-based glue in there, and it's got a cover so it doesn't dry out. You can tip it on its side and all the glue kind of rushes to the base so that you know, if you want to store it overnight, and then you can flip it down so that the top layer doesn't kind of get a little bit drier. It always stays super liquidy and super fresh. This is my glue brush. It's a silicone reusable glue brush. I swear by these things. I used to use little cotton dowels, or really cheap. You can get them in like a 20 or 100 pack on Amazon. I used to use those, and someone pointed out to me in my comments, I'd say probably about a year or two ago, that I was being really wasteful, and I was like, you're kind of right, actually. This sucks. So I picked up this guy, and I love this thing. It's super easy to clean after it's really dry. So I haven't used this today yet, so it's really dry. So you just kind of rub it around in your hand, and all the glue sticks together, and then you just pull it off. That's the glue. Now it's fresh, super clean. Love this thing. Up front here, pricking iron. Now I have two pricking irons. I can actually bring out the other one here. This is a 6-prong and a 2-prong. The 6-prong I don't use too much anymore. The 6-prong is if you're punching all of your stitching holes by hand on every project, which I don't do because I have the Glowforges you can see in the back behind me. This one here is the Pro, that one there is the Basic. So I use those to primarily punch out my stitching holes, but if you're doing it by hand, these are Cinnabrox pricking irons. These are the 4.0, so 4 millimeters is the space between each of the pricks. And this one's a 2-prong. The 2-prong I actually do use quite often. I've used this for watch band loops to prick those. I do that by hand. Same thing for belt loops. And then every crafter needs a mallet. This mallet is on its last legs because you can see I favor the left side of the mallet. So every time I hit a little bit more toward the left, so it's chipping and it's not super flat. So I often slip off and hit my hand. So this one needs to be replaced. But I picked this up again. This was the first mallet I ever picked up off of Amazon in 2020 when I first started getting going. And these are the first upgrade I ever did from crappy Amazon starter kit pricking irons, chisels, whatever you want to call them, that kept bending. So every time I would prick, you would have crooked stitching lines. So first thing I would recommend upgrading to would probably be pricking irons, just because your crappy ones are going to bend, the really cheap ones. This is made of real brass, I believe. Beautiful tools from Cinnabrox, and they're handmade, I believe, in Korea. This little thing I didn't explain, but this is where I keep my needles. Keep all my John James needles. I don't remember the size of these needles, but I do know that they go with Vinimo number 5 thread. This is just an artisan wood thing that I actually think it was made for toothpicks, but it works perfectly for that. I already explained my glue. The only other thing I didn't talk about is a punch pad, which is really boring. You want to put this down on your table before you use pricking irons or hole punches, because you don't want them to damage your table, and you don't want your table to damage your blades, your prongs, or your open hole here. So if you're punching, make sure you have a punch pad. This is really small. It's like 6 by 10 or something like that. You get one cheap on Amazon. But there you have it. Those are all my main essential tools. Now I have main essential machines, like a burnishing machine. My Glowforges are what you could consider tools, but those are bigger than a video like this. So if you want to hear more about those big machines, if you want to hear my essential machines list for maybe the more serious crafters looking to really expand their collection from hand tools to machinery to help with efficiency, productivity, things like that, let me know in the comments. But for now, this is it. If you want to see a more in-depth how to use these tools kind of video, pick any of the tools that I mentioned here and let me know what you want to see. At the end of the day, guys, I appreciate you watching. A like and a subscribe goes a long way to help build my small channel. And just as a little piece of news, I'm actually moving. So this is a small, really small, almost jail cell sized garage. You can't really even fit a car in here, so it's really just for storage. But this is where I work out of. This is where 80 Proof Goods has expanded into, and we've very quickly expanded out of this garage. And I say we, it's really just me. My wife and I bought a house recently. It's got a beautiful 2-car garage that we'll be looking to convert into our new studio. So this space is not only, it's going to more than double. It's going to about triple, because this is not even really a 1-car garage. So I'm really excited. So by the end of this month, we'll be moving into that space, so I can really give you guys a tour of my craft setup and my process. So with that said, thanks for watching. I'll see you later.